So they kept saying, you got to write music that's super tuneful that people can remember forever, but doesn't get annoying after you played it 10,000 times.
Hello, welcome as always to Side Quest, and today I am so thrilled to be sharing my conversation with the legendary Grant Kirkhope. For those unfamiliar with Grant and his iconic catalog of video game compositions, here's a few of them. I don't know what more I can say about this man, but he is truly a great at what he does. And I'm pretty stoked because I got to talk to Grant not only about his work on Banjo Kazooie, but what led up to it, the music that inspired him growing up and how that kind of planted seeds of informing what he ended up doing on banjo. From being classically trained at trumpet to diving into heavy metal as a young kid and ending up playing in bands and rubbing shoulders with the likes of Van Halen, to his love for Sinatra thanks to his parents. All of it has really informed the music that he makes as a video game composer, and some of it kind of found its way into Banjo Kazooie. One of my favorite parts about interviewing creatives is finding out the music that led them to make the decisions that they make, or even knowing where they were when they wrote a specific song or they came up with a certain idea. And Grant and I thankfully got to explore all of that in this conversation. So if you've ever wondered how, Freddie Mercury somehow informed the soundtrack to one of the greatest 3D platformers ever made, you might just find out right now. So I hope you enjoy this one. Let's get going.
As a kid, right, my dad was a massive big band sort of Frank Sinatra fan, right? So my early stuff that I liked was like Glenn Miller and Frank Sinatra. I liked Frank Sinatra a lot as a kid because my dad just played it non-stop in the house, right? So I was kind of into that right at the start. And you get older, start to get into a bit of pop music and stuff, don't you? So I guess in the UK back in my day, it was kind of the glam era, So I guess the first real band that I really got into was Queen. So when my cousin came down I'm Scottish, right? My cousin came down from Edinburgh. He brought 2 albums with him. He brought Sheer Heart Attack by Queen and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John. And so it just blew my mind. I couldn't get over how fantastic Sheer Heart Attack was. It's such a fantastic record by Queen. And I went and bought it, and I wore it out and bought another one because I just played it so much. I couldn't get over how brilliant it was. And I went back and bought Queen 2 and the first original Queen album. Well, maybe all of them, in fact. I think I might have got all of them. There was one band that I never missed an album. I bought even Hot Space that no one liked, even bought that, right? So yeah. I just thought, and Brian May's guitar, because as a guitar player, so Brian May's guitar playing was just amazing. I was quite, because I self-taught guitar player, I could pick up things quick, so I could play quite a bit of Brian May stuff back in the day. So everyone thought it was amazing. I was like, I didn't think it was, I just did it because I could, So, and then I always went to the rock. So after you get to your pop phase when you're a kid, I was definitely on the rock side all the time. So, so I went from rock to more heavy metal stuff. So, I got into all the kind of British new wave of heavy metal stuff that came along. Rainbow at the start when they were kicking round, Deep Purple. I don't really like classical music in this true sense of the time period. I'm not a Mozart-y, Bach, Handel-y guy. I like the Romantic period much later, which is more chromatic and more tuneful and more epic, I suppose. Two sides to me all the time, right? I was a long-haired metal fan playing in the symphony orchestra, so that was kind of me, really. Like today's singers, they would never believe it. They would just have to go, I can't do it. I need to do it multiple times to get on the do it line by line or even phrase by phrase sometimes. And all the people in the band and the big band playing behind Sinatra and the string players, and they had to be great as well. They couldn't make any mistake. You only sing it once. So if they made a mistake, tough luck, So that level of musicianship, I feel it's sadly missed these days. I was a big Brad Adams fan back in the day, because and there's one line in that Kids Wanna Rock. It says, "This computerized crap ain't getting me off." I used to love that line. But it's so ironic that that's what I do these days. I sit at a computer and write music. I kind of feel like I've sold out a little bit. But I just think that level of ability is astonishing. I'd left college at 22 and I played in lots of bands, right, from 22 to 33, 11 years really. So I kind of left university. So I don't want to play trumpet really if I can help it. I wasn't that keen on it, but I was good at it. So I did play in I had some of my own metal bands that had little indie deals. We made a few albums, didn't really go anywhere. But I played for a soul funk band called Zoot and the Roots, like a North Yorkshire band, which was pretty popular in the day. We did the whole uni circuit, played around Europe, It was a proper working band. It was like 3-4 nights a week for like 6-7 years. It was proper full on like, real like ridiculous distance. Like we'd drive down, and we were in North Yorkshire. We'd drive to the south coast of England and play a gig, which was like 300 miles, then drive back at 2 a.m. Get back at 7 a.m, like ridiculous in the middle of winter. Like it was brutal. And we did know that band did really well, but just never got a record deal.
Mm-hmm.
I got offered one, but turned it down. And I always thought it was a mistake at the time, but that's what happened. And I ended up playing for my own metal bands, plus playing for quite a big UK rock band called Little Angels on trumpet. And they were friends of mine from years gone by, and I knew the managers, but would have add horns to one of the songs. Do you want to do it? So me and my friend Frank, who was in the roots of being on trombone, did this first record for them. And just became part of the band really in the end. We tour with them and do more stuff. So that was great. And we did we did gigantic tours with that band, like proper full on rock and roll. So we were with Elton John for like Bon Jovi for a 6-week European tour, Van Halen for a 6-week European tour, ZZ Top, Brad Adams around the football stadiums in the UK, like the old Wembley Stadium, 70,000 people. We played Mannheim Stadium at Bon Jovi with 90,000 people. Wow. These gigantic shows. I mean, it was just absolutely brilliant. Like a bunch of lads traveling around in a truck, in a car, kind of thing, around Europe, just playing these gigantic gigs. And, getting to know Eddie Van Halen was, because I was a guitar player, was like just amazing to me. Like he gave me a guitar. I've got a guitar sat right there that he gave me, so just unbelievable, right? That band split. I was back to playing in like cover bands in my local area, playing in pubs for £35 a night, each, just playing rock covers. He announced he'd got a job at Rare, like working on video games. I was like, what? Like, no one that I knew got a job. We always played in bands, unemployment benefit, all that stuff. I was like, oh my God, that sounds spectacular. So he'd been there about a year and a half, said to me, look, Grant, you've been on unemployment about 11 years off and on. I said, well, it's true, I have. He said, don't you think you should try and get a job? I was like, well, what can I do? He said, well, pardon me, why don't you try and do what I do? Rent music video games. And I played tons of games at the time. Mm-hmm. So he recommended me to buy some gear, like an Atari ST, copy of Cubase, synthesizer, bits and pieces. And I've told the story 100 times, but I sent Rare like 5 cassette tapes over the course of 1994, that I thought was video game appropriate, and never got a reply. And out of the blue, got a letter saying, please come for an interview. Dave Rice interviewed me and I got the job. So it was complete fluke. I never once ever thought about being a composer. When I was at university doing music, I was terrible at harmony. I failed the harmony exam 3 years out of 4. Yeah. Couldn't understand it, couldn't write it, didn't get it at all. I only scraped by in the 4th year. But yeah, so if Robin had never done it, I'd never done it. Like the Goldeneye team, no one there had made a game before, right? So I feel like that's why it's so good, because no one knew what they were doing. We just would go, I don't know, that's what that should sound like that, right? And so I feel like that's a great way to make games, because you do it from the heart as opposed to from the head, right? Yeah. So there's nothing behind, you're not thinking about any kind of preconception. I was just like, I need to write some music that sounds a bit like Bond, with the Bond tune, and anything, and any style I could think of, like, and that's why it turned out the way it did. And Graham also, wrote, half the soundtrack the same way, so. And Graham's a big electronic music fan, so he came into it from that side. I'm a big rock fan, so I came at it from that side, so it kind of met in the middle somewhere, So, it's just your influences can't help but bleed in all the time. You can't help it. It just the way it comes out. It was like we'd been doing Dream, right? So Dream got cancelled, and I'd written like 107 pieces of music for Dream. And it was a very RPG sort of Zelda exploratory game, right? So very different to a platformer. So I remember Tim Stammer saying to me, all right, it's a platformer. I was very new to the company, right? So let's see if you can write a platform tune. I was like, oh my God, So the first tune I wrote actually was Click Clock Woods. But it wasn't called that. I wrote something that I thought was a jolly platform tune. That was it, right? I wrote that, and so this is what I think a platform tune sounds like for a platform game. So, oh yeah, great. So it wasn't. So I didn't use it. It just left lying around until it got to Click Clock Woods. I thought, what, that piece that I wrote at the start could maybe fit that. It was quite late in the game, so I put it in there, but it wasn't written for that level. So the first tune I wrote was, Mum was, for a level, Mum Was Mountain, And I was trying to find I knew that there was no point me trying to write that kind of Nintendo poppy jazz that Koji Kondo does, because I can't write that kind of music. I'm bad at it, and it would be awful. So I had to find something that I thought was Monster Mansion. I realized that it was kind of quirky, oddball, and then I thought it fitted that thing, so I put it in there. And then I went back and redid Mumbo's Mountain and Treasure Trove Cove because they were different when I first wrote them. They didn't have that quirky tritone sound that the game sort of became renowned for. So, and Chris Stamper, the guy, said to me, one of the bosses, Tim and Chris Stamper ran the company, said, "Look, Grant, we think you could go back and switch Mumbo's Mountain and Treasure Trove Cove." It's quite near the end of the game, and I wrote those. I changed them to match the quirky style that came later, that I fell upon later in the game. So, so I guess it was probably, I think, Mad Monster, maybe. It's hard to completely remember, but I remember, because I've been listening to Beetlejuice, right? And I was trying to work out how to get dark harmonies in a quirky game that wouldn't frighten the kids, right? That was and I realized Danny Elfman had that whole umpa going on thing, that kind of, I guess you call it polka style. So, and the Beetlejuice soundtrack, and I was like, oh God, that's a great, so I realized it did have a quirky rhythm with dark harmony. No one gets it to be too dark, but you feel it. But it's not frightening anybody, because so I was like, oh right, so now that's how I do it. So I like what went in my head, and I was like, oh yeah, I can do it like that. So, and then I went back and retrofitted it to other parts of the game. So, but, the whole tritone thing. There's a cartoon in the UK called Mr. Ben. It's super old. It's about a guy that used to go to a tailor's shop every day, and he'd go to the tailor shop and he'd try on a different outfit in the changing room, and he'd get transported. So he tried on like a knight's outfit for fancy dress, he'd get transported to have an adventure in the knight's world and the knight's kingdom, and then he'd go the next day and try on a clown's outfit, and he'd go to a circus, and it was all this kind of kids thing, right? But when he changed, there was a little. He used to go dudley, 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 go and try to like C major, F sharp major, C major, F sharp major, like that. And there's that little riff stuck in my head forever as a kid, right? And I guess that popped up when I was doing Banjo Kazooie, going, oh God, that's got quirkiness to it. That's got oddballness to it. Being a staff composer, it's a 9 till 5 job, right? So you go in at 9, you start writing music. So I think sometimes you hear a lot of composers waiting for inspiration to land on them, and the hand of the Lord, sit in a darkened room, and the hand of the Lord hands them, I don't believe in God, but I'm not like that. I'm a very workman-like person. So, I'd sit there and mess around until I heard something that I liked, and I feel like being at Rare for nearly 13 years and doing that every day is such a great habit to get into. I don't have that writer's block. And generally speaking, I can write something. It might not be the best thing in the world, but I can write something every day. I can get on with it. I write something, I'll start, messing around with it till I hear something that I like. So for me, I think it's sat at my desk with my keyboard, messing around with a sound, a French horn or a clarinet or a synth sound or whatever it is, and try to find a set of chords or a melody that I like. It's just very workmanlike. And I say to people, I do talks with young composers, here and there. And I always say, don't be that guy that's got to sit till 2 a.m. waiting for the inspiration, or guy or girl. You need to write something. Just write something every day. Set yourself a certain, if it's 9 till 12 in the morning, whatever time it is, do it every day at that time. Never change. Day in, day out. Sit down, write something every day. Get you in the habit of doing something. You might write crap, but you can mess around with it later. If you don't write anything, you can't edit it. If you can write something and edit it later, great. If you sit there and not write nothing, you got nothing to edit, right? So, do something every day. Don't just waste your time thinking I'll get inspiration tomorrow. You won't.
Yeah.
Get on with it, So I feel like being a staff composer was such a great way of working to get into. I think Freeze Easy Peak was I like that a lot. I wrote a longer piece of music, and I was just trying to throw everything in there in the kitchen sink to try and make it exciting. And I really feel like I'd written something that was different to me anyway. I'm not saying I don't know, but it felt to me that it was different. It had a lot of excitement into it. It was a lot of different sections, and I felt like it really enhanced the battle. So yeah, I'd say probably those three. It's such a special moment that when it all kind of comes together, it really is, and you think, oh God, it really fits. Like you don't know really till. Because the game's in early stages, there's not a lot going on. There's not levels that really built or anything. It's a bit of a blank page. So, you start writing music. The Secret Monkey Island games, right? The LucasArts games, which are fantastic. And they said you should play. So they got me to play all of the LucasArts early games, like Full Throttle and Day of the Tentacle and Indiana Jones and the Monkey Island games, which are all just brilliant, right? And the Monkey Island had that thing, but the music would morph as you went around the level, right? It wouldn't stop playing, but it would morph to different arrangements as you went to certain parts of the island with Guy Threepwood, and all that stuff, So they said, we want you to do that. And I was like, how on earth does that work? How did they morph? Because that was FM synthesis, right? It wasn't MIDI files that we were using. So I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I really had no idea. And we hit on the idea of you've got 16 MIDI tracks in a MIDI file, so you can turn them up and down in software as you go along. So I was like, I could allocate tracks 1, 2, and 3 to that area, and tracks 4, 5, and 6 to that area, and then we used to draw circles under the level so you couldn't see them. So when Banjo crossed the circle, it would trigger. So getting all that to work, it was so brilliant, and people noticed it. It was like, oh my God, how are you doing that? Like, it was just fantastic to get that to work. When people say you changed my childhood, it's like, I came to realize, recently-ish that, all in between like 5 and 10, 12 era of your life, when you're that age, all the kids shows that I watched when I was that, I still remember the theme tunes and all the words to this day, right? Like,
do you have a favorite?
Well, Thunderbird's theme tune or Stingray are one of those old things that you probably can't remember, but but I mean, I remember all that theme tunes on the Scooby-Doo theme tune and the words to it and all. You don't forget that for the rest of your life, right? You remember that it's baked in forever. And so when people say to me, people in the 30s now are remembering they can still sing every Banjo Kazooie tune note for note and not get it wrong, because they were playing it when they were that, a bit emotional now, but like, that's such a special moment. It's like, oh my God, if I could be part of that to help you remember your mother, your father, whatever it is, you're a relative, my God, that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I don't take that lightly, and that never gets lost on me. That people can get blasé about that kind of thing. I never get blasé about stuff like that. I think I'm so lucky to be at that company at that time on that game. It was complete and utter fluke that I just happened to be there at the right time and just happened to get onto Banjo Kazooie, because there's lots of other games going on that could have been on. Just the way it worked out. Because everyone was busy. I did that. They did that. And it's just what an absolute fluke to get like that. And it's I always say, like, for any artist, if any persuasion, right, like a writer, a photographer, or whatever you are, if anybody in the world likes one idea that came out of your head, just one person, how amazing is that? Like, that I can think of a piece of music and it might touch somebody 3,000 miles away, and just one, nobody else. That's amazing. And for a few people, that like it, it just gets exponentially more incredible as you think about it, right? So, it's hard to quantify, to put that into words, really. It's such a special thing. Like, I'm a big metal fan, right? So I'm a massive Eddie Van Halen and Brian May fan. They're two of my favorite guitar players. And I feel like you can hear them play a note and it's them without knowing it's them, right? Because there's just something built into the way they did the vibrato, the way they play something. You can tell it a mile away, right? And I feel like, some people say I've got this Kirkhopean sound, and it's not really by design. It's just the way I write music. And I feel like it just comes out of my head a certain way. And I think every composer has little nuances that they like to use, little chord sequences, little bits and pieces. And I just got this kind of tool set that I like to use, and it just sounds like me. And I like in Sparks, I hope it still sounds like me. I can't help it. I feel like whatever I do, people will say, oh yeah, I can hear a bit of banjo. And even if I can't hear it, there's something about what I do that people can pick up on it. It's fantastic to think that, I've got a little bit of a style that somebody can recognize. But like I say, it's not by design. I'm not really a very clever composer. I'm not very intellectual. I just mess around until I hear something that I like. So, and I guess that's why it sounds like the way it does. And I tend to not listen to other video game music. When I'm writing movie stuff, or I do listen to movie scores, but I don't listen to other game scores really very much. Not very often anyway. And so maybe that's why it just keeps sounding like me, because I like to try and pull it out of my head without too many influences if I can possibly help it. But I'm sure that all my fandom of like John Williams and Danny Elfman and Judas Priest and Queensrÿche and all that stuff's all wrapped up in what I do somewhere, you know.